anybody could walk by. And now she's fixated on that. Okay, good. Need you to focus on the lesson I'm interpreting right now. Things like that, or problem solving. So in her case, she could see a chair in her way and just look at me and go, what do I do? And she's not even signing, what do I do? She just shrugs, or she just runs and points at the chair. And now I'm prompting you to really, get those gears turning cognitively. How do we solve this problem? There's a chair in your way. Present options. You can walk around it, you can move the chair, you can ask for help. Things like that are not able to be understood, even for a middle school level child. And then current research concludes that it's irreversible. So if you are not getting language input before age 5, typically it becomes irreversible, especially if you then get to puberty age, which is middle school. It's going to continue to affect you into adulthood. One of the things that also came up in the research is that you're born with all the neurons you need, right? So think of it this way. You're given all the building blocks you could possibly need for your brain to both fire on all cylinders. But without language input, you don't access some of those things. And you don't actually start to build the structures in your brain that you need. Like the gray matter. Your brain is a muscle. So the same way you go to the gym and work out, you have to work your brain out in a sense, right? Exercise your brain muscle. So without language input, that exercise is not given to the brain. It doesn't develop as strong as it should. And given that you will quite literally need your brain for your entire life, think of it that way. That's the cognitive development portion. So this image just shows how, when language deprivation is at an all-time high, so think severe language deprivation, your cognitive and social skills are far lower. So they're an inverse relation to each other, a negative relationship to each other. As one increases, the other will increase. So the sweet spot actually is not in the middle, like most things, you want an average. Sweet spot is over here. High cognitive social skills and abilities, low language deprivation experienced. Okay. Diagnoses and being deaf plus. Okay, so a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. When it comes to diagnosing deaf kids, or hard of hearing kids, really, something that comes up is that yes, you are, tested with someone who knows how to run this test, but they don't know how to adjust the test for that person, right? Most of these tests are designed, with a mindset rooted in autism, and again, photocentrism. We really value hearing in our culture and in our world. But when they're conducted by people who are trained and skilled in conducting these things, the screenings, the evaluations, the exams, they don't know how to alter it to fit that person. So they're often unable to adequately assess the stated quality of the required criteria. So every test needs to be objective, reliable, and be able to say that the procedures are valid, right? And that you can explain how you consider it and determine the range of normals. But they can't even do that. So then when those criteria are not met, that standard, several legal and ethical consequences can rise, like inaccurate test results, which can lead to inaccurate diagnoses, causing inappropriate or harmful treatments, and a lack of fairness can result in biases and outcomes prejudice against the deaf community. Some diagnoses that I have seen, and also are kind of the reasons why I wanted to look into this, are language disability, general development disorder, social and emotional abnormalities, speech development disorder. You could also even say like some people experience in their own testimonials, they'll say like feeling isolated, feeling lonely, because they don't have the language they need to express themselves or to communicate with others. And are there any others that you guys can think of? I personally have a theory about a couple. I spoke to a speech language pathologist, an SLP, and she was telling me about an article she saw that said language deprivation can appear like autism, or it can appear like ADHD. So then we really have to ask ourselves, how could we accurately evaluate students and children, give them one label like autism and ADHD, and it's okay if you have that, but if it's the wrong label and diagnosis, how can we help you if we've gotten it wrong from the very beginning and you weren't autistic, you weren't experiencing ADHD, you really had language deprivation. So think of it this way: if I'm constantly frustrated because I can't express myself, and this is also drawn from experience I had in an elementary school, how would you communicate with someone? How would you express yourself? Well, you might get really frustrated. Frustration can lead to what we might call a more aggressive act, throwing a chair, throwing a table, when really you're trying to communicate, but you don't have the language necessary. In terms of autism, maybe you're trying to self-soothe. You don't have the language necessary to communicate what you need. So maybe you're stemming a bit more. Or maybe you genuinely have both, and we're only treating half the problem and not treating the whole child. The impacts on language to acquisition, literacy, and academics. So academic achievement in subsequent years, which depends on strong language and conceptual abilities, is consequently an uphill battle. The well-documented academic differences between children of deaf parents who acquire ASL as a native language and those who do not acquire ASL in the early years reflects in the difference in early linguistic stimulation. So it's essentially saying we see a stark difference in parents who gave their kids access to ASL between 0 and 5 and those who did not. So early sign language exposure has been shown to improve literacy with respect to a written L2 as well. So think of it this way: just because you're given ASL between 0 and 5, it won't hinder you from learning how to write in English. It actually will support your ability to get writing skills, reading skills, grammar in another language. But there are structural weaknesses in our society and in our educational system in the provision of sign language input and environments. The way our culture is set up, the way our world is set up, has its own systemic barriers to helping our deaf and hard of hearing kids. So too few and further education, training opportunities for deaf sign language teachers. So there's not enough deaf sign language teachers is what it's saying. We don't promote them to the positions they need. Here at UNF, we have deaf professors who teach ASL. They could get a position in a different department if they wanted to. If they wanted to teach math, they could hire a deaf math teacher, get an interpreter, things like that, but those opportunities aren't available. Then there are too few providers of home sign language courses. And then willing parents meet a lack of resources in the sign language communities that they need. So parents I work with wonder, how do they start learning sign language? Where do they even go? I know personally from working at FSTV, they have free courses. It's 1 hour a week for 8 weeks, and it's free. There's a rise in apps you can use right now. They're developing AI tools you can use. So we see some things becoming more available when it comes to resources, but the information is not out there, or the technology is still being developed, or there's just a lack of awareness of what is already available in the community. And there's far more than we even realize. This image that's up here, the left side says the separate underlying proficiency model of bilingual proficiency. So you'll see, it's not really loads of brain, but we'll call it that for this section. The left lobe says L1, and the right says L2 proficiency. So in some models and some theories, people think that they're separate and they're not connected at all. That has been disproved